I'm Sophie, and I will tell you the story of a really emblematic flower, a flower that exists in a multitude of shade and color, the tulip. So I'm sure that when I say tulip, you are thinking about the Netherlands, and you will tell me, Sophie, why are you speaking about the tulip in Middle East Garden magazine? And that's where my story will go. The tulip actually is absolutely not a European flower at the origin. The tulip is native from Central Asia and its history crossed the Middle East story. So let's go back in the past. Back before the 10th century, the tulip was just a white flower growing in Central Asia. The scientists do not agree where the modern tulip really comes from. But the modern tulip is surely a crossing between different species of tulips that collectioners collect around the world. Tulipa oshariana is not only the smallest tulip in the world, she is too a good candidate to be the tulip of origin, as it is native plant from Iran and Syria. Tulipa sylvestri is a species we can find from North Africa, Europe to China. The Tulipa alberti can be seen on the desert of Bedpakdala in Kazakhstan. Tulipa borskovsky is present in Iran in the wild. The first to cultivate the tulip for its beauty were the Turks. We find the first trace of its past cultivation in this part of the world around 1000 after Christ. In this part of the world, the Byzantine Empire was just reconstructing itself after a lot of crises. Let me open a parenthesis here. It is said that in the Netherlands, during the Second World War, some people had to eat the tulip bulb to survive. They had nothing else to eat, so even if the tulip bulb contains some toxicity, it can be eaten in second intention. So we can think that the people in the Byzantine Empire, after years and years of crisis, had nothing else to eat than those tulips, and that's why they start its cultivation. It is absolutely not advised if you have tulip to eat them. So it is under the reign of Basil II, at the beginning of the 11th century, that the tulip emerged as a cultivated plant. 2 centuries later, the tribe chef August Osman I founded the Ottoman Empire, which developed in the region to the end of the Byzantine Empire in 1453, with the conquest of Constantinople by Mehmed II. After the conquest of the city, Mehmed II started a high program of construction and reconstruction of the city of Constantinople. He also asked the population to come back. He started a great project of construction of palace. And that is in the 16th century, with his great-grandson, Suleiman the Magnificent, that we start finding the tulip as an ornamental flower. When Suleiman the Magnificent was trying to find perfect flower for his garden, the tulip was soon adopted. It's also at this time that we think that the genetic crossing of the tulip started. Hybridation of the Central Asian plant and the Caucasian plant certainly start at this moment to start the embryo of the modern tulip. At this time, the flower represents the wealth and the power of the one that can afford it. It was a tradition to wear the tulip on the turban. That's also at this time that the story of the tulip of Europe started. Auger Geslin de Busbeck, a Flemish writer, was sent to Constantinople as a Dutch ambassador to visit the court of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1554 and 1556 to discuss the Transylvanian border. Auger was a collectioner and a botanist, and he wrote a lot of books about the flora of the Turkish land. As a collectioner, Auger was interested in a lot of fields, but horticulture seems to be one of his particular interests. One of the jewelry of his collection is a 6th century copy of Discordes de Materia Medica, a compendium of medical herbs. That is a 6th century manuscript about horticulture. So let's make a point about the name of the flower. Augier came back to Europe with the name of Tulip, but at this time Suleiman the Magnificent or his gardener certainly presented to Augier the flower as Lale. In Arabic, it's the name they give to the flower even at this time. But Augier certainly didn't get it, or for any reason didn't choose this name, but the name Tulip was close enough to the name Tulip, which means the turban in Turkish. And we can easily imagine why Augier decided to name the plants this way, because of the petals that can represent the shape of the material of the turban when the tulip blooms. So let's go back to our diplomat. When Augier saw that flower, he decided to send it straight away to one of his friends, Carolus Clusius, who is also a really known botanist of this period. Carolus Clusius was known for its work on the Spanish flora. He was particularly interested by the plants that the Spanish brought from the New World and acclimated it on the land. The first specimen of tulip are described in his book about Spanish flora in 1560. We don't know if those tulips are European native or brought by the Arabs during the occupation of Spain. Let me bring here another name of the botanic of the 16th century, Dodonus. Dodonus was a medicine professor of the University of Leiden in Netherlands. Some legends said that a friend of Dodonaeus, Joris Rai, visited a merchant in Antwerpen in the spring season, probably in 1568. At the back of a shop was the usual waste pile, and on he saw an unusual colored flower blooming. The merchant explained him that he found a bag of onion in its silk import, but when he tried to cook it, it tasted so bad that he threw them with the rubbish. Joris Rai collected the bulbs and sent them to his friend at the Leiden University. Dodonaeus decided to send some of those bulbs to one of his friends, Carolus Clusius, the one we were talking previously, who was a botanist in Vienna. Dodonaeus describes the tulip in one of his first books on ornamental plants. At this time, Carolus Clusius was working for a rich family as a professor, but was not yet recognized botanist. He was just a well-known collectioner who had a lot of contact. It is thanks to his contacts that Carolus, in 1573, becomes the director of the Garden of Vienna. In this garden, Carolus continued his work to acclimate the tulip to the cold weather. A couple of years later, in 1593, Carolus moved to Leiden to become the director of the Leiden University Garden. At this time, university was really proud to have a garden, because a garden was the study book for its medicine student, because remember that all the medicine at this time was plant. So the one that was using the garden made by Carolus was Dodonaeus, the medicine professor. Carolus was trying to understand why some tulip had stripes and some other didn't. Like any good scientific, he tried to control as many variables as possible to isolate the cause of these color breaks. He experimented with different soil and fertilizer, measured temperature, and analyzed other factors. The tulip spring bloom started to become a great attraction for visitors of the garden. By two times, the garden has been visited by Swift, in 1596 and in 1598. Some bulbs were stolen. We think that this shift is the beginning of the tulip trend. Here is where I end my story about the tulip. And if you want to plant tulip in your garden in the Middle East, Just remember that those plants are originally from here. Please remember that the tulip grow in hardiness zone 4 to 9. If you want to know in which hardiness zone you are, please refer to another video I make, technical video on the hardiness zone. The cultivar you will find on the market mainly come from Europe and they are adapted to cold climate. They are not for here. So if you can find Turkish plant that is much better, Kazakhstan will also be a good option. And always go for native species if you can. Always go for small size tulip because it will be easier to cultivate because they are genetically closer to the wild flower. One of the tulips you can have in the region is Tulipa rumiensis, Tulipa turkestanica, Tulipa alberti, Tulipa rososcopi. Darwin tulip also are good for the region because they are really resistant to heat. If you have the chance to find native species of your region, please multiply them, share them with your friends to save their genetic. Because tulip are fragile flower, plant it here in November in soil or in pots. They will go better in full shade or at least in partial shade. But if you put them in direct light, they may dry really fast and you will not enjoy the bloom for long. When the flowers stop to bloom and the leaves turn yellow, just take out the bulb from the ground and store it in a bucket with sand, or you can just wrap them in journal paper. I hope you enjoy the seed story of today, and I hope to be able to bring you a lot of other story in the future. So for that, no special guest. Arrête là. Please subscribe to my channel.